This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Paul Hansen. Thurley, Ruxton by Philip Verrill Mighels. Chapter 18. Delayed Decisions. The remainder of the evening was, for Thurley, more of a trial than a comfort. Her triumph continued, but she felt its hollowness, felt that mockery dodged her footsteps, and that dark abyss loomed ahead. She could not escape her besiegers, the eager swains who continued in varying manner to convey their state of heart and mind. Count Faischi was not in the least rebuffed, at least to outward appearances. Both he and Gaylord took advantage of every possible moment to push to her side and renew their more or less invulnerable wooing. Even the midnight supper, where at 30 daintily decorated little tables the guests were assembled for refreshment, failed to re-inspire the ingenuous delight with which the princess had entered upon the evening. It was late, and Thurley was weary and a little depressed when at length she and Alice retreated from the scene to be driven to their home. Both would undoubtedly have been thoroughly alarmed had they known that in the street outside a man had waited all the evening, spying upon their movements. It was the same individual who, on the night of the horse show, had exchanged a glance with the ashy-eyed woman before he followed them through the avenue in a hired taxicab. He tagged them tonight like a shadow, and in front of Alice's mansion was relieved by another of his ilk, who had helped to keep an unbroken record of every movement Thurley made, and the visitors who came to the place. There was no immediate retiring when Alice and her protégé were finally alone. To Faischi had been granted the privilege of riding with them to the door. Thurley had managed to avoid actual contact with the nobleman, but something in her conduct and silence while in the carriage had addressed itself to Alice Van Kirk's intuitions and aroused her curiosity. She followed Thurley to the girl's boudoir for a confidential chat. "Well, dearie," she said in genuine affection as she seated herself at ease after having temporarily dismissed the maids, "another joy and trial over. You made me very proud and happy. You enjoyed it, I hope?" "It was easily all your evening." Thurley was pulling off her gloves. She sank in a chair and looked at Alice just a little wistfully, her dark brows slightly raised in youthful query. "Must I say I did, to please you? For I'd say anything to give you pleasure," she replied. "I did enjoy it at first, more than any experience in my life, and then—" She did not finish, and Alice waited, her intuitions receiving prompt confirmation. "And then, dearie, what?" she inquired softly. "You know I felt that something had marred it just a little." "Two things," said Thurley candidly. "I've been dying for the last 2 or 3 hours to get you away and tell you all about it." Alice settled further in the chair. The colour mounted to Thurley's cheeks as she found herself thus committed, and the task of confessing harder to face than she had previously expected. "Something disagreeable?" Alice encouraged. "You needn't mind telling me, you know. We're good friends, no matter what may happen." Sudden alarm possessed her. "It isn't that some hot-headed man has already proposed and you've—" "Oh, Lordy, no," Thurley interrupted, instantly placed at her ease. "It wasn't so decent as that on the part of Count, though I don't pretend to know his final intentions." Alice sat up more rigidly. "Oh, the Count has Thurley suddenly rose and dashed a tear of anger from her eyes. "He kissed me. He dared to do that out in the fernery. I could have killed him." Her indignation required no protestation. It was advertised in all her attitude as she turned from her protector to hide the crimson of her face. Alice could make no immediate reply. She was angered, exasperated, and thoroughly undecided as to what she ought to do. "It was bad enough," Thurley continued, "to have him talk nothing but his nonsense, and to dare to face me afterward, and even come home with us too, the horrid beast." "In the fernery?" said Alice. "What did you do?" "I hardly know," said Thurley, and related her somewhat confused remembrance of the incidents as they happened. "I must have struck him or something, for he nearly fell. Then I begged Robbie Stuyvesant to take me away." She halted there, with a new flush of colour creeping to her cheeks at the memory of seeing Gaylord at the door. Alice tapped the floor with a small impatient slipper. "This is really too bad," she answered presently. "I need the Count so badly just at this time. Mind you, dearie, I shouldn't care how severely you punish him or humiliate him later, if only we could manage to keep him on for a time, in spite of what he has done." Thurley stared at her in honest amazement. "You wish me to see him, endure him after this?" "I know exactly how you feel, my dear, and I admire you for it," Alice answered. "But our position is peculiar. It may last a brief time only, this triumph. For many reasons I did very much desire to treat the Count rather well as the others at least, and now I'm annoyed more than I can tell. The miserable I knew it. I felt he was quite that sort. Thurley, isn't it finer art, more gratification in the end, to let him return for his need of deliberate retribution? Couldn't you skewer him far more satisfactorily by calm intent than by mere impulsive resentment?" "Oh, I've thought of that," Thurley confessed in her usual candour, resuming her seat a little wearily. "I've thought of so many things to-night. You see, he isn't all." In her agitation, Alice had momentarily forgotten Thurley's statement that two events had marred the pleasure of the evening. "Oh?" she said. "Yes, there's something more. Not so bad as this, I trust?" "I'm not sure. It may be worse. You remember meeting Mr. Gaylord?" Alice nodded, and she continued, "He knew me in New Haven. He was even my at least I thought he intended to. He threw me over in plain English, and now he wants to make love to me again." Alice stared, all but speechless. "Thurley, and you like him still?" Thurley rose again, superbly active. "I hate him. To think he'd come like this now and dare oh, it does seem as if I've got a right to make him suffer." Alice rose too. "This is certainly grave. He mentioned your present position, asked questions, I presume. He isn't positively the cad to take advantage of this knowledge." "I don't know," said Thurley, once more relapsing into her chair. "He hinted at things, and, of course, asked questions and made insinuations. He insisted on coming to see me, going back to our old relationship, and said he'd make his treaty with you." "And you?" said Alice. "You were careful, of course, non-committal. You didn't leave him offended or vengeful." Thurley's eyes flashed warringly. "No. I almost determined to do everything in my power to lead him on, and then later even up the score. But he made me so angry. I don't know whether I could really do it or not. I'd probably despise myself. I'd rather not try. I don't know what to do." Alice smiled in sheer relief. She was suddenly sure of the future. "Don't try to decide anything tonight, my dear, and don't be uneasy or angered or anything but amused, at least for the present. It's time we retired. Don't forget, dear Princess, that you are certain to be the target for all of Cupid's arrows, the bitter with the sweet. It is sometimes possible to fight fire only with fire, and some kinds of love with art." She kissed the tired girl affectionately and smiled reassuringly. "But," said Thurley, "when he comes to see you, what will you do?" "Nothing you will refuse to ratify, nothing the situation does not justify, either with him or Faishi. But I hope, dear child, we're the equal of two selfish men. Will you leave it to me?" "My fairy godmother," said Thurley smilingly, "what else could I possibly do?" Chapter 18